Hi, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up. I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in February. I don't even know how many books I read in February. I read 7 books in February, which I know, to most people here on this platform, 7 books in 1 month is not a lot. But that is the most books that I have read in 1 month in a while. So I'm proud of myself, and that's all that matters. So the first book that I'm going to talk about that I read in February is actually the last book that I read in February. And I wanted to mention it first, just kind of briefly, because I did an entire reading vlog dedicated to it. It was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I will put it somewhere if you want to go watch it. It is filled with spoilers though, so if you haven't read it and you want to read it, obviously wouldn't advise watching it. But of course, as Resand likes to say over and over, it's your choice. Just to touch on it briefly, I did not enjoy A Court of Silver Flames. I did not think it was a good book. I thought the pacing was honestly quite terrible. It was not something that I enjoyed. There were moments where I could appreciate it, but for the most part, Court of Silver Flames and I were not vibing. You know, I don't think we were on the same wavelength there. So it got a 2-star rating for me. So the actual first book that I read in February was A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. You know, just keep going with the Sarah J. Maas books here. Court of Frost and Starlight is the novella in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. It was okay. I've heard that a lot of people really don't like this one. I don't know why. Like, I mean, yeah, nothing happens. Like, it's not important. It's not necessary, but I thought it was cute. Like, there were some cute, like, face hand scenes that I appreciated, but I don't know, like, it just was what it was. I didn't think it was that special. It was just a little fun novella. That's really all it was. I don't know why so many people hate it. I've heard that people think this book did the characters dirty. I think the only character that this book really did dirty was Nesta, and I think she does it to herself. So that's just me. I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I read last month was Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. This is a book that I had to read for class. Reading this book was honestly quite a painful experience. And that'll be a recurring theme here in this video. But I'm not gonna argue that I think this book is bad, because I don't think this book is bad. I just think it really wasn't for me. Like, this was so irritating to read. This book is about a man named Gulliver, and he travels to places that are outside the norm. So, like, the first place he travels to, all the people that live on that island or whatever are super tiny, and the next place he travels, it's the same shit but opposite. Everybody's super huge and he's super tiny. Like, that's literally it throughout the entire book. And then the last place he visits, the people are horses and the horses are people, if that makes sense. Like, the roles of people and horses are swapped. It sounds kind of interesting, but it really wasn't. This book was tediously boring, in my opinion. It was genuinely one of the most boring books I've ever read in my life, I think. It was honestly kind of crazy to me how much I hated reading this book. This book made me forget that I like to read, honestly. And it honestly sucks when a book does that, especially when it's one that you can't just stop reading. Like, I can't just DNF this. Like, I had to read this. I had to finish this. And I think the only thing that I really took away from this book, honestly, like, that really stuck with me, like, you know, I got the satire and all the political stuff about it, but I just didn't care about it. Like, who cares? But I think the one thing that really stuck with me was, if there was a book written from Gulliver's wife and, like, children's point of view, I want to read that. Because the main thing I took away from this book was that Gulliver is a shit husband and father. And I want to know how his wife and children felt, because he would just up and leave them, like, just straight up ditch them for years at a time to go to these, like, fuck-ass places. And, like, he went to 4 different places, I think. Well, he went to a few more, but mainly he went to 4 different places. And he was on these different, like, islands or countries or whatever for, like, multiple years without seeing his family, and then he'd go back for, like, an X amount of time and then go fuck off for more. I don't really know that anybody cares about me spoiling this book, but for the sake of not being terrible to the one person that may care, I will refrain from completely spoiling. But at the end, Gulliver's mind does a little shift, okay? And he starts to feel a certain way about some things. And I just know that if I was his wife or child, I wouldn't be taking that shit. So I gave this 2 stars. Wasn't my favorite of the month, but there it is. So after Gulliver and his travels, I read The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. This has been one that I've been wanting to read for years now, and I finally did. And it was okay. It was just okay. This book follows a girl who is, I can't even remember how old she was. I think she was like 13. She was murdered, and it follows her like in her afterlife, kind of observing and spectating like her family and friends still alive and the investigation going on about her murder and everything. So it basically follows her just kind of essentially living vicariously through her family members and like her sister and her friends. I expected this book to be a lot more fast-paced than it was, and it wasn't necessarily slow-paced either. It was kind of like slow to moderately paced, but it still wasn't exactly what I was expecting. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, obviously, to get what you weren't expecting. It just, this book wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. I thought this was gonna be more of like a murder mystery. I thought this book was gonna focus more on the investigation of her murder, but it didn't. It really focused more on like the lives of her families and people moving on past her death. And that's okay too. Like, that was still a good story. But I don't know, it just wasn't what I was expecting from this book, so it kind of threw me off a little bit. There was like some weird shit at the end that I didn't really appreciate. I feel like up till that part at the end, which I obviously am not gonna be explicit about it because spoilers. Like, I feel like for pretty much the whole book, I was like, okay, this is fine. Not exactly what I was expecting. I'm not super into it, but like, it's okay. And then we get to the scene at the end. Probably like in the last like 50 pages this happened. And I was like, no. Didn't like that part, but I don't know. It threw me off. It really threw me off. I didn't like that. And then the actual ending and how everything concludes with the man that killed her, I didn't like. I thought it was honestly really anticlimactic and pretty underwhelming. I know that there are some people that find that ending kind of satisfying, but I just didn't. And I thought there could have been more done with that. I feel like there should have been more done with that, but I don't know. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I read in February was Grown by Tiffany Jackson. This was such a wild ride. Like, it was like a roller coaster that never ended, and that is scary. This book follows a 17-year-old girl who wants to be a singer. That's like her dream, is to be a singer, make music, all of that. So she tries out for a singing competition, kind of like the X Factor, American Idol situation. She doesn't make it through, but one of the judges of the singing competition is some famous singer who's like 11 years older than her. He essentially becomes her mentor to like give her professional singing lessons, which becomes manipulative, like a grooming situation going on, and a lot of other terrible shit. Right before this book starts, it literally has a content warning for sexual abuse, rape, assault, child abuse, kidnapping, and addiction to opioids. So yes, this book is a wild ride. There was so much going on in this book, I could not put it down. I read like the first half one day or something, and I was like, okay, this is pretty good. And then I started the second half, and I could not put it down. I read the entire second half of the book in one sitting, because it was just, like I said, it was a roller coaster that just never ended. Honestly, the only thing that I didn't like about this book was I thought it was way too fast-paced. It was like if you're on the roller coaster that's never ending, but it's just loops. It just felt really, really fast-paced. I felt like the last like 50-ish pages, maybe almost 100 pages, it was all kind of just thrown together. Like, there were so many things that happened by the end of this book that I was like, what the fuck? Who are these characters? Like, what is this? Like, what's happening right now? Like, oh, I forgot this girl existed. Like, what's going on? Like, there was just a lot. It was just a lot. It felt like scenes just kind of came and went, and I was like, wait, what the fuck just happened, you know? I don't even think the book needed to be longer. I felt like there were some things that happened at the end that weren't really necessary and didn't add that much to the story, but just a little bit too fast-paced for me. This book, though, does have really good commentary and discussion on how women are treated by police, and especially how Black women are treated by police when coming forward about sexual assault and stuff. This book also does a really, really good job of portraying a good example of how child predators groom and abuse their victims. I felt like those messages were conveyed really well throughout the story and the characters. I gave it 4 stars. Honestly, aside from the pacing, this was a really good book. And I think this was honestly the best book that I read in February, so yeah, definitely recommend this one. The next book that I read was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Lately, I've been wanting to read more romance books because I've always liked romance when they're incorporated in other stories, like fantasy romance and stuff, but I've never really read that many romance books. I've read a few, and I don't know, it's always kind of 50-50 for me. Either I enjoy it or I don't. I feel like most of the time I tend to not enjoy them, but every now and then there's a gem in there. So I've been wanting to read more books like in the romance genre, and this is obviously, as we all know, very popular on BookTube. So I picked this one up, and it was okay. I was honestly kind of disappointed with this book. I expected to love it, and I expected to be like super into it, and I just wasn't. I know that a lot of people say the second one is better, so I got the second one. I'm gonna read the second one. We're gonna see how it goes. This book is about a woman named Chloe who has this like near-death experience, and after that she creates a list, essentially like a bucket list of things she wants to do with her life, that to her, those things that she has on her list qualify her as getting a life. Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Right off the bat, I do want to mention that Chloe's character experiences chronic pain. She has fibromyalgia, and which was really interesting to read about because I have never read about a character that has chronic pain. So that was something new for me. I learned a lot about chronic pain through her character and through this book, and I really appreciated that, and I liked that a lot. So I thought that representation was really good. And I've also seen that a lot of people that do have chronic pain have said that the representation of it in this book is done really well. There's also a lot in this book about abusive relationships and how that can affect you in the future, finding other relationships and meeting new people and trusting new people, and I really liked that in the book as well. I thought that was done really well. It talks about going to therapy and how your trauma and your experiences, especially in abusive relationships, can and will honestly affect your relationships in the future, but how to cope with it in a healthy way rather than an unhealthy way. And it shows how hard it can be for people to meet new people and enter new relationships after coming out of one that was abusive, and it shows how to essentially deal with that in a healthy way. I thought that was done really well, and those were honestly probably my favorite parts of the book because it gave you more insight to the characters and their experiences in life. I really enjoyed the characters individually, but I felt like the romance is where the book kind of fell flat for me. For about the first half of the book, it felt like Disney Channel, if that makes sense. The dialogue was honestly kind of cringy, and I felt like the scenes were super drawn out. Like, I thought they were way too long. Like, there were scenes in this book where I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. Like, let's move on to the next scene. I don't care about this one anymore. Let's get it going. After that first half, though, I felt like once the characters became closer and they got to know each other better, the dialogue was not as cringy anymore. It didn't feel like a Disney Channel script anymore. It was much better. But I mean, we still had that first half that was very Disney, you know? And like, this is a romance book, okay? This is an adult romance book. It went from Disney Channel to Dick, and like, I can't do that. Overall, like I said, I thought this book was okay. The first half did not care for really anything going on, and then the second half it started to pick up a little bit. We got more insight to the characters' backgrounds. It was still overall okay. I never really cared for the romance. It wasn't really my favorite part of the book. Like, there wasn't any part where I was like, oh my god, they're so cute. Like, I don't know. It was fine. It was really fine. I gave it 3 stars. Like I said earlier, I do have the second book in this series, which is about Chloe's sister and her romance, which everybody says that book is better than this one. So Hopefully I agree with that opinion, but I'm excited to read it. But yes, that is this one. After Get a Life Chloe Brown, I had to read another book for class, and it was Flatland by Edwin Abbott. You know, Gulliver's Travels was painful, but this one was like painful on a whole other level. This book was like less than 100 pages, I think, and it took me like 2 weeks to read. I think that is enough to let you know how I felt about the book. This book is about a two-dimensional world called Flatland, where all of the people or inhabitants of the world are shapes. They're two-dimensional shapes. And that's it. That's really it. It's not even a story about like a shape living their life on Flatland. No, it's about a square on Flatland, basically just explaining how Flatland works and how Flatland operates. That's it. That's all it's about. There's like a class system of all the shapes, so like circles are at the top and isosceles triangles are at the bottom. Women are lines. I hated this book. I hated it so much. This book was just so unnecessary. And like, okay, here's the thing. This book was written in like 18 something. And at the end of the book, it starts talking about like different dimensions. It goes into like the third dimension, and it even goes into like a fourth dimension and stuff, which you have to acknowledge that for the time that this book was written, that's kind of like crazy, you know? So I have to acknowledge that. Like, that's kind of amazing. And I mean, I didn't even like enjoy that necessarily. That I wasn't like, ooh, I'm into it now. Like, no. I was just kind of like, oh, wow. And then I moved on with my life. Like, that was it. I gave this book 2 stars. Wasn't good. I did like it more than Gulliver's Travels in a way, because I thought in some ways it was more entertaining than Gulliver's Travels. It was just because of how ridiculous it was, and Gulliver's Travels was ridiculous too, but Gulliver's Travels was like so boring. I can't even explain how boring that book was. Yes, I don't know. That was Flatland. So those are all the books that I read in February. It wasn't the best reading month ever in terms of me liking what I read. I did read the most books that I've read in 1 month in a while, but a lot of them were just kind of okay for me. It was a lot of 3 stars and more 2 stars than I would like to have in a month. So yes, that was kind of disappointing. Hopefully March will be better. High hopes for March here. But yes, that concludes today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!